Hello everybody, welcome back to another Dragon Ball Z Final Stand video, and in today's video I'm going to be going over how to build every character. And also guys, I would like to just say this, I have set up the channel members thing, so if you guys want to become a channel member, go ahead and click the link in the description to become a channel member today. You'll get access to a channel member Discord only. You only have to pay for the subscription one time though, and you're in it permanently. If you run out of your subscription or you decide to cancel it, that's okay. You will stay in the Discord server. There is no issues there. Let me know down in the comments below if you did become a channel member so that I may shout you out. And as always, I will also shout out my channel members at the end of the video. And I do have 2 channel members to shout out, which I will have their channels down in the description below. I highly recommend you check them out and give them a big thanks. Channel member 1, Painset, one of my good friends, and I really do appreciate that, man. It means a lot to me. Go subscribe to him. He makes TF2 content, and his videos are actually really well made. And they put me to shame because I'm not very good at making videos. And my good friend in the military, please thank him for his service, Thomas Townsend. Really appreciate that.
You, Kakarot, I choose you to be the first of my victims.
Every so often, I'll actually continually get comments on my videos about how to build certain characters and races in Final Stand. Even to this very day, even on some of my more recent videos, I'll get asked about it. And instead of constantly answering the question or dodging the question as a whole, why not just make an entire video dedicated to every single race in the game so that I stopped getting asked this question? And who better to start off with than the Saiyans? Saiyans are obviously the most popular race in Final Stand, and I obviously know why. They're very cool, flashy, and they're really simple to understand. Now, the biggest weakness with Saiyans, for the most part, is they have very low base stat categories. Except for this one. This is an imp-statted Saiyan, but for the most part, you guys know what I'm talking about. Saiyans are noted for having a base stat category of 1 for 3, meaning they get 1 stat into their base stat every 3 levels instead of the 1 for 2 or the 1 for 1 that androids get, making them the weakest race in the game in their base forms. Now, of course, this is made up with really high stat point transformations like Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken with the 700 stat multiplier that it adds, or addition onto your stats, which obviously will make up for it, and stuff like that. So clearly, people are like, well, should I put stats into health? Should I put stats into key max? No, you don't have to do that. Saiyans are pretty easy to play since their best transformation is Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken, primarily because it has the most key max out of any transformation in the entirety of Final Stand. It has a 10 times key max multiplier. That is fucking absurd. That is an astronomically high number. You don't run out of key with this form. If you're rebirthed, you'll have like 500 key max if you're like level 700 prestige 3, which most Saiyan players are. You use the transformation, you won't fucking run out of key. There is legitimately just no reason to ever run key max on these characters. And another question I'll get asked is, should I put stats into health? And honestly, no, because since your base stat is so low, you'll get like nothing out of health, like nothing. I usually express how important it is to be tanky in these kinds of games, mainly for soloing content and being capable of taking care of yourself, but Saiyans don't need to worry about that, man. Like, your high stat transformations will just make up for all of the shortcomings that you have. Mainly the resistances will make up for the lower health stat, and the damage will be significant enough for the player to not need to have high amounts of health. Most of the time, people will do glass cannons on these characters and run only melee or key damage, which, yes, I think you should do that. This is one of the few characters where you can get away with it, and it works as well. Do only damage. Do not waste your stats into anything else. All of your prestiges do only damage. Well, I know Saiyans, you might have thought that they'd be a little bit more intricate than the other races. They're really not. They're really simple to understand, and they give you a bang for your buck. You don't need to overcomplicate them because you just get everything out of them anyways, so usually it's good enough to just put stats into damage, and you'll be good. There's no reason to put anything into health max or key max, as previously stated. Just use Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken. Don't bother putting any stats into health because of how low your base stat category is, and it works out for you in the end. I promise you, you'll have a better time with it. You can solo all the content with it. Just spam Flash Strike, Flash Skewer, and Sweep Kick, and you can solo any content in this game without a single bit of problems. So yeah, moving on from Saiyans.
You should never trust anyone, ever. What the?
And up next we have Arcosians, or Frieza, or Frost Demons. Whatever the hell you want to call them. Frost Demons are one of the more rare races in the game. Not many players play them, so commonly enough, not many people are actually asked about them, because I've only ever been asked about them twice ever. Now, how you properly build a Frieza is also pretty simple as well. Pretty much similar to Saiyans, you only really need to do damage on them. Now, this actually is going to differ quite a bit, because you also want to put a lot into ki with them. Maybe half and half. The reason being is that ki moves in this game use quite the amount of ki, and a lot of players won't have the ki max to sustain that, and spamming ki moves on them is your most effective option. So putting a lot into ki max is very important. Putting maybe every 3 levels, put 1 into ki max, and then the rest go into ki damage is a pretty good sacrifice as a whole, if you're not instatting, of course. You doing this will allow for ease of use, especially on the key moves like Blaster Meteor, Eraser Cannon, and stuff like that. You won't have to stop and charge, or you won't need Senzu Beans or Blue Beans, or anything like that, and you can just do full damage. Trust me, you won't regret doing that. 700 key max, 800, maybe 1000 key max is usually good enough on them because of how high their base stat is. 1 stat every 2 levels, which is going to be common, and that's actually the same for every race in the game except for Saiyans and Androids, which are 1 for 3, and of course 1 for 1 respectively. Putting stats in the key max will definitely help you quite a bit on Friezas. Don't underestimate that stat at all, and of course putting a lot of stats into key damage as well to keep up with doing Broly's and things like that, and other content within the game, because as people know, key damage is considered to be one of the strongest things in the game, better than melee at times, especially for doing the content. PvP wise, key is usually considered worse, so not a lot of players are going to pick Friezas, mainly because of their key centered playstyle. All of their transformations giving them more stats into key damage and then melee damage, and of course you can still do a melee damage Frieza if you want to. It's completely up to the player's choice. If that's something that you want to do, then go and do it. I'm not going to stop you. I get a lot of questions about that too. I actually had a guy saying, oh, is it dumb to have a melee damage Frieza? And I was just like, you can do whatever you want, man. It's your character. I'm not gonna stop you. Like, if you want to do melee damage Frieza, then you do that, man. Like, you guys can make that decision. I'm just giving you my 2 cents. It's my opinion, by the way. This is my opinion. I should have mentioned that. Yeah. So don't take anything I say like here to heart, but this is all my tips from the years of playing this game, of course. Friezas are also pretty simple. I mean, building in this game as a whole is very simple, and it does not require much thought outside of understanding how the game works and how each race works. It's not overcomplicated. Just maybe on this race for Friezas, maybe on this race on Friezas, maybe what you want to do is when you're not prestiged yet, put all of your stats in the key damage prestige once, and then start putting stats half and half between key damage and key max, so that you can get the most optimal amount of key max by the time you're prestige 2. This will help significantly in the long run, again, because key max is very important on them so that you can continuously spam key moves or whatever else you might need, including things like Spirit Bomb and Planet Crusher, which are both noted for being some of the strongest in the game, especially for when it comes to soloing content. Whether or not you agree with me on this is really up to you, but I do recommend you put a lot into key max. Oh, and of course, key damage. Moving on from Friezas, we have Majins, one of the first videos that I've ever made on this game, and that got super popular was, of course, the Majin video, as we all know and love. I'm bringing it back, boys. Yeah, let's go. But to put it simply, health max and key max. That's all you need on Majins, really. Majins aren't exactly the best race in the game, as I've previously stated before. Incredibly hard to build. Their forms are all terrible, low key max on all of their transformations, and pretty rough all around, and they're only really good in PvP. Yes, this race gets the short end of the stick when it comes to anything in this game, man, and I'm not a fan of it, let me tell you. So, what can you do with them? Well, obviously, I just said health max and key max. After doing extensive testing and realizing that my old video that I made was pretty much false and was just not really well made, I realized that health max and key max gives you the most bang for your buck on Majins and is superior in every way to resistances, and most likely always will be. Health max increases the per capita on the resistances, of course, as we all know. So the more health you have, the more damage you could resist and all that jazz. It's some weird math equation, but from what I was able to gather, the more health you have, the more you get out of the resistances. instead of vice versa. So that's why I recommend you put in a lot into health and key max. Now, other people would be like, oh, well, how should I do it? Should I just like do one every 2 levels, maybe put one into the key max or whatever? Just even split. That's what you should do. You should just do even split between the health max and key max. I mean, this is what the stats are on this character. It's a melee damage health max hybrid with a little bit of key max. So yeah, it's been working out for me pretty well. Melee damage on Majins is noted for being quite good, and as long as you know how to build your character, about 800 to 900 key max on Majins is usually suffice enough to get anything done within the game. But for most general players, I recommend an even split between health max and key max so that you could do any content within the game. And yes, you can even solo Broly's with this build. You might not think you can, but trust me, you can. I've done it. It's really tough though, so honestly, if you're going to make a Majin, do it for PvP, because Unstable is overpowered and is incredibly good in PvP. So, take my advice, avoid them at all costs if you can, but if you are going to make one, health max and key max is just the way to go, man. Especially when it comes to Unstable. Unstable has only a 4.2 times key max, and is not very good. 4.0 times key max, which obviously is not healthy for anyone involved. And yeah, it sucks. Yeah, 4.0 times key max is the lowest in the game out of any Prestige 2 transformation. That's awful. Yeah, that's really bad. And obviously the trade-off is teleport punches, just like what Ultra Instinct has, and it's on demand too. So I mean, hey, you kind of get bang for your buck with it, so it's not all bad.
Well, aren't you the confident one? Another proud Namekian soon to be begging for mercy just like all the rest.
Shut the hell up.
And moving on from Majins, we're going to go over to Namekians. Namekians are pretty much the exact same to Majins, except that they don't have the downside of awful key max. Well, how would I build these, Trop? Well, Namekians, surprisingly, are really easy to build. They're actually the most player-friendly characters in the game, since none of their transformations really stray away from anything. And they're all pretty good, all with a pretty solid key max. You could do any build you want on them, honestly. You could do key damage, melee damage, health max, key max. You can do whatever you want, man. But if you want my opinion, I would say health max, melee damage hybrid between them is very, very strong. You get the most out of the regeneration with that, and you also get high melee damage, so you're capable of soloing all the content within the game. Broly's, Tournament of Powers, any quest you can think of. Yeah, I recommend you run this. Health max and melee damage. I've known a couple of people that have done it and have spouted to me how great it is. Health max and melee damage is super, super good. Now, for those who don't like melee damage, you could also do key damage and key max if you'd like to instead. And that works as well, since you don't really need that high of a health max because you have regeneration that's on cooldown for only 2 minutes, which is pretty good. And how exactly you should build these is really up to the player, per prestige, what stats you should put in and what stats you shouldn't put in. And like I said, you pretty much have as much leeway and leniency as you could possibly have for a build in this game, because Namekians really aren't geared towards anything specific and aren't held back by their transformations or shitty key maxes or like low stats or anything like that. They don't have that downside. Like they get a little bit of everything. They're a generalist character for anyone who wants to pick up and play without really thinking all that hard. I definitely recommend that you play Namekians if you are starting out with this game, and for the Final Stand Remaster, it's probably what I'm going to play. I'm joking, I'm playing Majins. Come on now, let's not joke with each other here. But yeah, I recommend you just do whatever the hell you want, man. That's a race that you just have fun with, man. But my personal opinion, I think melee damage and health max is the way to go. Maybe every 3 levels put one into health max, and all the other stats go into melee damage for the most optimal stat spread, of course. And up next we have ourselves humans. Humans are also touted for being one of the worst races in the game. But humans are pretty much a mixture between Majins and Namekians. Terrible for a lot of reasons and not really good in anything. Like, they're not good at really anything. Look, if I'm going to be honest with you, it's going to be the same exact build as Majins, just health max and key max, and you'll be fine. It's more of a PvP race for the aesthetic than it is anything else. You're not going to be grinding super hard with them, but if you do full melee damage, which I recommend you do if you do decide to do a damage build, that's pretty much all I have to say about humans. I know there's not much to say about them, just even split between health max and key max, and it gets the job done. If you want to do health max melee damage or key damage hybrid, you can, since it is pretty effective on them. Same stat spread as the Namekians. Put one into health max every 3 levels, and then the rest goes into melee or key damage if you so wish. The key max build is a little bit more interesting on them because their forms don't really have that terrible of key max, except for Dark Human, which, if I'm not mistaken, has like a 4.2 times key max or something like that. It's pretty low. So yeah, I definitely recommend trying to steer clear of them due to the low stat categories in their transformations. And if you do plan on doing a damage build on them, try to put a little bit into key max. Get about 800 to 900 key max, and you should be fine with them, and there won't be much of a problem. Except for PvE content, that low of key max will not really be suffice for PvE. So I definitely recommend you try to get into about the 1100s range if you can. Otherwise, just do full damage builds on them and pray to God that you can solo the content. But for the PvP build, definitely put in some health max. And up next we have androids. Just full damage. Yeah, that's it. Just full. There's literally no build. Just put full damage, man. And like, you get so many stats. Just full damage. There's just key damage, melee damage. Just up to the player. And up next we have ourselves Jirens. Essentially just Namekians on steroids, better in every way than compared to Saiyans, and are marginally insanely overpowered. You can essentially just do any build you want on them. They're very strong with health max, mainly because of their 1 to 2, and the fact that they get a transformation that gives them 700 in every single stat category. And of course you have the damage build, which is very popular on them. Just like Saiyans, I'm going to tell you the same thing. Do a full damage build on them. They get 1 for 2 in their base stat, meaning they get 1 stat into all their, their base stats every 2 levels. Therefore, the transformation that gives them 700 stats into all their categories, except for key resistance, is pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty overpowered, so you don't really need to worry about putting anything into health max and key max. I've actually done and seen people who have done health max builds on them, and they're just about unkillable by anything. And I'm telling you, man, it's kind of insane, I'm not gonna lie. So if you're going to do any build on them, I recommend you just do a full damage build. Similar to androids, they're not that complicated, and they don't really need any fine-tuning compared to things like Majins, humans, or Arcosians. It's essentially just how tanky or how much damage do you want to deal build, you know what I mean? They have such high key max as well on their final forms that you don't need to waste any stats into key damage. So you could just put everything into, damage, and you'll be fine. Like, their health max is good and is so high that when you transform, the 700 and 400 resistance you'll get from melee and key res is astronomical. Like, you just don't need to worry about it. Mind you that unstable gives you 425 into all of your stats. That's only 25 less to unstable. So what's even the point of putting any stats into key resistance? It's just not really worth it. So I definitely recommend that. Yeah, I'm gonna keep repeating myself, but I definitely recommend you do full damage builds on them. Trust me, you don't need to overcomplicate it. Jirens are just like that. But at the same time, like I said before, they're just like Namekians. You can do any build you want on them, so go ahead and experiment. My recommendations will always be full health builds because they're the most fun, and I love being tanky. But if you want my most optimal build on them, I think it's going to be both damage builds. You could even do a hybrid between melee and key damage, which works on them as well because of how high their damage can get. So yeah. And thank you guys so much for watching, and as always guys, if you hated the video, make sure you dislike it and leave criticism down below. It's the only way to get better at doing what you do, and I will see you in the next one.